Welcome to the Sports Porch Philadelphia. We were back after an extended vacation.
Yes,
right?
Extended time off.
Extended time off.
An extended time off during the down period.
You got it. This dead zone. Welcome to the Sports Porch Philadelphia. We're actually live right now on Facebook, on YouTube, on X.
All over live, and it's storming outside, but it doesn't matter if there's a tornado. We're not going off the air.
Not unless we go up in the air.
We're already in the basement.
That's right. We're in the most secure part of the house.
That's right.
All right. Thanks again for being here, guys. We're back after a little bit of a vacation for Schwaber. We call it the Dead Zone. We do drop the podcast right after the show on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get
your podcasts.
Your what? Your friggin' podcasts, right?
Your freaking podcast.
All right. Almost choked on my own spit there. My wife would have been proud. All right, Schwaber. Well, let's just jump right back into this. This is what we do here. I want to remind you, we also have a YouTube channel up now at Philadelphia Sports Porch. But the way we do things around here is we take it in pages because Mark wrote me a manifesto of notes about, 6 months ago. And we just went page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4.
I wouldn't quite call it a manifesto. Well, that sounds like somebody who unloaded rounds on people.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what you do verbally sometimes. Page one this week. The Phillies, off of a series loss to the Baltimore Orioles. Zach Wheeler got tagged for 4 home runs.
The first time in his career.
Yeah, first time in his career.
Yep.
And they're currently 47-24. They've lost 2 in a row, but hey, look, they were playing so well. Right. And we talked about this a couple weeks back. You kind of want them to hit a patch where, they struggle a little bit because there's no way to stay this hot all season long. Right. And it's an exhausting pace, even though they're enjoying winning, and we as fans are enjoying them winning. To keep this pace up, it's just not something you can do. So it seems like they've kind of leveled off.
Well, it does kind of show you, though, that some of their star players are pretty darn important, right? Mm-hmm. And I think typically what happens is if the Phillies go down 1 star player, they're okay. Like they went down Trey Turner and they did pretty well without him.
Right.
But once you added, it was Turner, and then at the same time it was Marsh and JT Realmuto.
Right.
Who JT Realmuto might be on the team.
Right.
Because not only is he a star catcher, and there are very few of them in this league.
Right.
There are also, is the handling of the pitchers.
Yeah.
Is another big factor.
Well, that's what the catcher does.
Right. And he's a big, and he's a big plus defensively. So, it's not surprising that they went on this down spell where they lost 2 of 3 to the Red Sox and 2 of 3 to the Orioles. So essentially, they've gone 2 and 4 over the last 6 games, with those being the 6 games that JT Realmuto has been out.
Right.
And no Trey Turner.
Right.
Although the good news is that Trey Turner is back tonight.
Supposedly going to play tonight.
Yeah. So that's a good thing. But, at the same time, though, sometimes I kind of think that maybe it's a good thing that this has happened because, the thing about the Phillies lineup is the Phillies lineup is as good as anybody, 1 through 9 in the league.
Yeah.
However, really I'd call it like a 1 through 7, and 8 and 9 are kind of weak, but all of a sudden you don't have 2 starters in there. And now all of a sudden it's like 1 through 5 and 6 through 9 are kind of weak.
Right.
So I think that it will be helpful for the Phillies in terms of the idea of going out and getting some help at the trade deadline. The main issue really, I guess, is lack of production from the outfield. Brandon Marsh, well, was having a solid year.
Yeah.
I don't know, what's he hitting, like 250?
256 at the time.
And how many home runs?
He had 6 home runs.
6 home runs, but he also missed like 3 weeks.
Yep.
So he's a solid outfielder, if not a solid platoon outfielder. Now, Johan Rojas was sent down today.
Right.
Now, to be honest, the only reason why he was really sent down is because they can't send down Christian Pache or David Dahl because they'll get scooped up on waivers if they do.
Right.
But still, I mean, I think he's hitting like 230, something like that.
Yeah.
Is that what you got there?
Rojas is batting 235.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have Nick Castellanos, who did finally get hot. I mean, he was hitting like 180 and he got up to like 225.
He's at 204 now. His OPS is 609.
Yeah, but then he went 0 in the Orioles series.
Yeah.
And now
people were getting really frustrated with him.
Yeah. And now it's frustrating. Well, the frustrating thing about Castellanos is, I mean, obviously he's still got talent. I mean, I think he has 10 home runs, does he? Or is it 9?
He has 9, yeah.
Okay, he's getting 9. So he's going to hit 20 home runs still.
Yeah.
But the thing about him is, number one, he's very streaky. And number two, it seems like he has no clue at the plate.
Yeah.
He's
struggling.
Well, here's the thing. Apparently, if you've watched enough of Nick Castellanos, you can get him with the slider away every time. Okay.
Right.
So if you're a smart pitcher, you just throw him 3 balls that are down and away, and you're going to get him out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's almost like when pitchers are just foolish and they just groove one right down the middle, or maybe it's a mistake that they groove down the middle. You know what I mean?
Right.
So what they decided they wanted to do with him at the beginning of the year was they said, we want you to work on not chasing. Right. So he does that and he's thinking too much and he gets off to a terrible start. And then he just says, hey, look, you know what? This isn't me, man. I just see ball, hit ball. I got to be aggressive. And then he started doing that. And then he went on a little bit of a tear for a little while. But now the tear's over. And now, again, he looks like he's got no clue at the plate. Yeah. So, and the thing that's really frustrating about it is like, this is kind of like a Nick Castellanos thing for you. Like, you could have back-to-back players before him walk on 4 pitches each, and you can almost be guaranteed he's swinging at the first pitch.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, that's just the kind of thing that he does.
Yeah.
You got to improve somewhere in the outfield. So you could probably use a right-handed outfield bat. I know they've talked some about potentially moving Bryce Harper back to the outfield because he's fully recovered now.
Yeah.
And maybe getting a right-handed bat that plays first base. But to be honest, I actually still think if everybody stays healthy, I actually still think that the most important piece is a closer.
Yeah.
I really think that's the most important piece because, this downfall kind of started where, they won the first game in London against the Mets.
Right.
And then the second game, they have a 3-2 lead. I think somebody, maybe it was like Strom or somebody gave up a home run and they tied it up 3-3. Then Dahl, gets a pinch hit home run to put us up 4-3. And then Alvarado couldn't save it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And like, that's the thing with Alvarado. He's a really good pitcher, but he's just more a setup guy. He does probably have like 12 saves or something like that. But the reality is he can be wild at any time.
Yeah.
And you can't have that when you're trying to close out games in the playoffs.
So do you think they miss Kimbrel?
Not at all.
No.
Like you're gonna I know he's doing well for the Orioles right now.
Yeah.
But he did really well for the Phillies for about 3/4 of a season last year.
Yeah.
And then his arm was just toast and he was just brutal the rest of the year.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Cano is back for the Orioles. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason they got Kimbrel, because Cano was their guy. And he's got electric stuff. Mm-hmm. And he had an arm injury, but he's back now. So we're talking about the Phillies, not the Orioles. But
there's a lot of talk now that they're really interested in this guy, the closer for the A's. What's his name again?
Minstrel, Misrol.
It was like Mike something.
Yeah, I think he's.
He's got an ERA in the 2s. Got like 12 saves on like one of the worst teams in baseball.
Yeah. I'll look him up.
He's like 25, and he's got really good stuff. Like something like maybe like 8 walks, 52 strikeouts. He's like averaging like 15 strikeouts per 9 innings or something.
Yeah. I'm looking him up right now. Yeah, his. Mason Miller.
Right,
Mason Miller, who actually I believe happens to be from Pittsburgh.
Is he?
Yeah.
Well, I would think if they could get him
2.27 ERA, 56 Ks in 31 innings pitched, and he's pitched in 25 games. So yeah, he's got some good stuff. He's a closer, bona fide closer.
All right, he's the kind of guy that I feel like if they get him and everybody stays healthy, they probably need another bat, but if he stays healthy, if everybody stays healthy and they get a closer, I think then they got as good a chance as anybody.
Yeah, and he is from Pittsburgh, so he's from Pennsylvania.
I will tell you though, the Orioles team is pretty darn good. I mean, they got the same record as the Phillies, right?
Yeah, they do now. Yeah,
right.
Well, the thing about the Orioles is they have a real lineup. I mean, and most of their lineup is younger. And they did exactly what they needed to do this year for the first time in a long time. They signed Corbin Burns, who's 8-2 with a 2.14 ERA.
Yeah. How about that?
He's putting in a Cy Young performance, and that is really what has not led them to the promised land like last year.
Yeah,
they needed a bona fide number one starter, whereas the Phillies they need a closer.
Yeah.
But that being said, for both teams, but especially for the Phillies, you're talking about a situation here in which they're 23 games above 500.
Oh, right.
They're still in first place by 8 games over the Braves.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is a situation in which, if you're going to have an injury, and it's not a serious injury because they're going to happen in professional sports, now's the time to have it, before the trade deadline. You got guys that'll be coming back. You'll be able to evaluate when they come back, barring any other injuries. What is your true need? What do you really need? Is there somebody out there? Is Mason Miller going to be available? Which I don't know.
Steve DeFlitch says Mason Miller to the O's. I think he's not really following baseball because they already have a closer.
They have a couple closer. Yeah, he's just trying to rile you up.
Yeah, it's funny.
But so I don't think that. Well, I think what we're seeing right now from the Phillies is exactly what we want to see. I mean, obviously you don't want to see injuries,
right? But
their lineup top to bottom is pretty good. I do want to make a comment on a text I sent you earlier today, though. Gunnar Henderson is the new Schwarbomber.
Well, yeah,
8 leadoff home runs this year.
Which is good. I think it's tied with Schwarber, right?
Yeah, and 22 on the season. He's
pretty good.
He was rookie of the year last year. He's headed for an MVP. Next superstar in baseball.
That's the thing about the Orioles that's interesting is they look like they got the goods.
Yeah.
But the one piece that they're missing, and they have to prove it this year, is can they do it in the playoffs?
Right. Last year they got swept by Texas.
Right.
But see, I think and we'll end the Orioles conversation after this comment.
Well,
I think
it's pertinent because they just played the Phillies.
Well, of course. I think that the Orioles last year, not only did they surprise all of their fans, they can talk all they want about how, we just play hard and we want to win ball games. So we weren't surprised. I think they surprised the hell out of themselves as to how good they can be. Yeah. And when they got into the playoffs, that stage was just a little too big for them. And the Rangers, no matter what year it is, I know we always say, the nemesis, they always beat them.
They have trouble with the Rangers.
They've always had trouble with the Texas Rangers. I can't explain it. And going into that series last year, I even said that to you guys. They have trouble with the Rangers, and they got swept. So, this year is the year where you try to put it all together. And so far, now, of course, the Yankees have come back, and Judge and Soto are hitting the hell out of the ball, and their pitching isn't bad, but I'm just hoping that they outlast them.
Well, what it really comes down to too is that I think that the reality is that I mean, look, we know from the past couple years that really anybody who makes the playoffs can win the whole thing.
That's true.
However, I would say usually if you're the 1 or the 2 seed, you got a much better chance of winning the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so really, I think it's going to come down to now, actually, the Dodgers had some really big injury news.
Yeah, Mookie Betts.
Mookie Betts is going to be out for a while. And then their other Japanese pitcher.
Yeah, Yamamoto?
Who's
Not Yamamoto.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember his name, but he's doing really well. He's now out.
He was going to be Rookie of the Year, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but let's just say the Dodgers keep up. I mean, really, it's Phillies, Dodgers, Yankees, Orioles. Those are probably your 4 favorites to win the World Series at this point.
Yeah, and we're still, but we're not even to the All-Star break yet.
Well, but that's the point. Is I don't think it really. See, I'm a big believer. I don't think it matters at all, like how you're playing. I think it just matters when you get to the playoffs how you're playing.
Right.
Honestly, like if you're hot from the very first game in the playoffs, you basically got to win what, like 14 games, 16 games, I don't know, something like that.
Yeah.
Right. So you get in a hot stretch during that period of time, you're going to win.
Yeah.
That's really all it comes down to. And health has a lot to do with it too.
Right. And that's when I talk about, playing right now and you go through a little rough patch, you struggle a little bit. Mason Miller is an Eagle Scout. That's actually true. Yeah, it is true. I heard that interview on The Fan. Anyway.
Well, I'm not sure we want him.
Yeah. But I think it does matter how you're playing because you've got to play at that level all year to get there. The thing about baseball is because it's 162 games, it's basically twice the NBA season, twice the NHL season, and 10 times the football season. Once you get into 70, 80 games, you do have a pretty good statistical size to say that, look, barring any real injury or like unbelievable collapse.
Right.
What you said earlier, you've got the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Orioles, and the Phillies. Right. They should be the Final Four. They should be, but you're going to throw somebody in. Somebody's going to come in.
You can throw in the Braves. You know, you can throw in. I don't know how far. Are the Rangers far out at this point?
The Rangers are. They are not having a good season.
They like under 500.
They were under 500, and currently they are 5 games under. The surprise this year is Seattle. They're 8, 9, 12 games over 500. So you've got them as a surprise.
How's Arizona looking this year?
The Diamondbacks,
I think they're not doing too great.
2 games under 500.
Right.
The Padres are a game under. But the surprises this year in the American League are Seattle, Kansas City, and Cleveland. So
Cleveland's been pretty good.
Yeah, and the Orioles and Cleveland always they play kind of even. They win one, lose one. Kansas City, we usually handle them pretty well. The Orioles do. As far as the National League is concerned, I mean, the team that I think is probably is surprising right now anyway is Milwaukee. Now, do I think they're going to be there? Could they be a surprise? Yeah, I think they could be a surprise.
Well, didn't they make the playoffs last year? Or if they didn't, they lost it in the last game. I feel like they did.
They won the division last year.
Yeah, so I mean, they're kind of expected to win their division. They will again.
Yeah, and I heard some guys on a sports show around here talking about run differential and how important it is. And I've talked about that for a few years. Yeah. I like to look at that stat. The run differential for the Yankees and the Orioles, the Yankees have scored 124 more runs than they've given up. And the Orioles have scored 114. The Red Sox only 38 more. So you come down, you look at the Phillies, 96 more. That's their plus 96. The Braves plus 37. Milwaukee plus 63. The only team in the National League that has scored 100 or more runs than they have given up is Los Angeles, the Dodgers at 101. That's huge because what that shows is that with a run differential of 100 runs, that's a lot of wiggle room. That means you're winning a lot of games by 3 or 4 runs, which takes a lot of pressure off of both your starting pitching, but also your bullpen. That means you're not scoring 100 more runs than you're giving up because you're coming back in every game after the 6th or 7th inning. It's because you're taking a lead into the 6th or 7th inning, and your bullpen doesn't have as much pressure. If there's what's more pressure on a bullpen, coming in with a tie game or a 1-run lead?
Tie game.
I think the more pressure is when you have a 1-run lead. When you come into the game,
one-run lead with players on base.
Yeah, well, that's usually when you come in. Yeah. But what I'm saying is, if you come in a tie game and you give up the leading run, you didn't give up the lead.
Right.
It was tied.
Right.
So when you come in the game, but if you come into the game with a 2-run lead or a 3-run lead, you've got some room to play with. You can give up a run and be like, okay, settle down, we're still ahead.
Yeah.
That's just the way I look at it.
Should we give Steve some education here?
I got to see what his Phillies' problem is. They don't have a new prospect. They just buy great players. None of them really care about a World Series. What do you think about that? Well, what do you think about that, Schwaber?
Well, I think the first part is they don't have a new prospect. Well, that's entirely wrong. Their second best pitcher is Aaron Nola, who was a first-round draft pick of the Phillies. Their second best or their third best pitcher, who is right now one of the favorites to win the Cy Young, is Ranger Suarez, who was a Phillies farm guy.
Yeah,
like a middle round pick. Alec Boehm was a number 1 pick, who's leading the team in hitting over 300. Bryson Stott is a number 1 pick.
Okay, so but maybe what Steve is talking about here is what's in their farm system.
The farm system's pretty good.
Okay, which I know. Actually, I know that.
Yeah. And actually, that's something that is kind of scary, because you're in a spot now where you've got all these good minor league players who are, rated as potential stars. I mean, they've got like 5 in the top 100 or something like that.
Right.
And you're going to have to give a couple up if you want to get like a Mason Miller or somebody like that.
And I'll be completely transparent with you here. I don't think the Phillies need anything.
They might not.
Now, when I say that, I don't mean they don't need depth on their bench,
right,
or another left-handed pitcher in the bullpen.
Yeah,
you can always use somebody,
right?
But if they stood pat at the trade deadline, and I love how we always say barring any other injury. Right. Well, every comment we make is made with the assumption there won't be a big injury,
right?
But we always have to. Everybody leads with that.
Right.
But, barring any injury, if they stayed pat at the trade deadline, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
No, I mean, and one thing I can say is, I don't know if this is the right way to think about it or not, but there is something to say for vibes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, one thing I can tell you is this team, I mean, it seems like they love each other more than any Phillies team I've ever seen in my life.
Right.
Just like everybody's just so excited for everybody on the team.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And they really look like they're having a good time playing ball and just having fun. And then I kind of think like, well, you take a guy out of that, like, does it hurt the vibes a little bit?
It does.
You know what I mean?
And we've seen that happen on other teams in every sport. So, any team sport, there's a chemistry, because you have to play together. Right. Even in baseball, even when you're at the plate, you have to know the situation. You have to know, if the guy that typically bats in front of you is on first, second, or third, what are his tendencies and what is the call going to be coming from the third base coach or the first base coach or the dugout. And if you get a certain call, take the pitch, bunt, whatever it is, you have to know the guy's tendencies. You have to understand that it's all about chemistry. So I don't know that I could name a team in professional sports. I'm sure somebody could, where the team afterwards, it was, oh God, we hated each other, but somehow we put together a championship. Like, it just doesn't work that way. Right. So I agree with you.
Right.
And that's another thing about a team like the Orioles, where there's a vibe.
Right.
They're growing up together. You got it. Yeah. And that's what happened with the Phillies. So Steve, thanks for trying to gaslight Schwaber, but I don't think it worked.
Yeah. And also Steve doesn't realize that Andrew Painter is Paul Skeens before Paul Skeens.
Right.
It's just that Andrew Painter got hurt.
Yeah.
And so he was going to make the opening roster of the Phillies as a first round draft pick last year.
Yeah.
Because he was that good.
Yep.
And blew the shoulder, Tommy John, so he's not going to play till next year.
Well, and you also, with Tommy John, even though they've perfected that surgery, you never know what you're going to get on the other end of that.
But they also got Mick Abel, is a pretty big time pitching prospect that's right there. They've got two really good players, one in the outfield, Crawford. It's actually, remember the Crawford he used to play for, was it Seattle? I think it's his son or something.
Okay.
And then they've got Aiden Miller, who was their first round pick like last year or 2 years ago.
Yeah. So the farm system is stocked with bona fide players. Yeah. And I think that Steve says thanks for the education.
You're welcome, Steve.
You're welcome. Okay, so before we move on to page 2 and flip the page, I want to remind you that if you are watching us live right now, you're watching on Facebook, Facebook, YouTube, and X. And we do drop the podcast right after the show on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get your
freaking
podcasts.
And
we do drop it right after the show. And you can also follow the Sports Porch Philadelphia on YouTube at Philadelphia Sports Porch. Go on over there, click the subscribe, hit the notifications button when we go live. You'll catch us live on YouTube. Page 2. Man, I'm starting to feel the withdrawal shakes coming for football.
Yeah.
OTAs, training camp's going to start, mini camp starting soon, training camp's going to start. How about what's his face not showing up to the Jets mini camp?
Hassan Reddick.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like Howie was a smart one there.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I mean, Hassan Reddick, obviously he was very disgruntled, but you gotta think like how, and we're going to talk about the Eagles here and some Hurts and Sirianni comments, but I just got to get this in, Schwaber.
Sure.
I just got to get this in because you know what I've always said about the New York Jets. What have I always said about them?
They're destined for disaster.
That's right. That the Jets are the place where quarterbacks go
to die.
And they do. They can't even field Aaron Rodgers for more than 3 plays when he comes over. And I'm telling you this year, I don't care. I know everybody's talking about Garrett Wilson is going to be a great receiver because now Rodgers is back. Listen, Rodgers hasn't played football in a year. He had a serious injury and he is getting older. I don't care about all the fluff about all the COVID era bullshit that he got into, all the mind meld vacations he goes on. Do your thing, dude. Right. Absolutely. You're super wealthy. You get really hot girlfriends. I love your life. I think it's great. It's awesome. I'd take it in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
I got no opinion on that other than great. Good for you. Let's talk about football. He is not going to play well this year. I don't care what anybody says. And what kind of organization are you when you grab a player, you trade for a player who is not elite, but a pretty good linebacker. Hassan was an edge rusher, right?
Edge rusher. Right, I would say he is elite.
Well,
he's top 5.
He's got elite capabilities.
5.
He says he's 2 things here. He says he appears to be disgruntled. He wants to be paid.
He wants to be paid.
You trade for him. And
you don't pay him.
And you don't give him a friggin' contract.
Right.
Come on. And what does it say about him that he decides, oh, sure, I'll play. Well, maybe this is his protest. This is classic Lurie. Okay. All right, Reddick. You don't want to play here anymore. We don't need that in the locker room. Sure, we'll trade you.
Right.
Here you go, Jets.
Exactly.
What kind of franchise are the Jets?
And then we took their best pass rusher and paid him.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But,
I have to hand it to the Eagles and the way they're running the franchise for the last 10 years. But Lurie's been around for 30 years now, something like that. Maybe a little longer.
Yeah, about that.
But really, they're putting together. We talked about chemistry with the Phillies. They're trying to redo their chemistry.
Right.
So God bless you, Hassan Reddick. too bad. And if you're a New York Jets fan, I feel your pain, because at my soul, I was a former Washington Redskins fan, and we all know how the Dan Snyder era went in there. But the Jets, good God, the Jets. I would rather be a Redskins fan than a Jets fan. I would take that any day.
So let's talk about the Hurts Sirianni. And I guess the first question is it more, is this much ado about nothing?
Well, refresh everybody's memory about the comments.
I'll refresh everybody's memory. So for those of you who aren't up to speed, the Eagles had a collapse at the end of last year.
Well, yeah, that I think everybody knows,
and their offense that's very good and should always be very good really struggled at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And there were some things that were kind of glaring about the struggle, like not really having a plan for the blitz,
right?
Not having a good, not really using motion. Like they used motion like the least in the league,
right? Well, they had coordinator issues last year,
right. And, not having people under center. So they bring in Kellen Moore, who's considered a very good coordinator.
Yes, he is.
Right?
Yep.
And he runs a lot of motion and puts the quarterback under center. So there's going to be a lot of change in the offense.
Right.
Okay. And so Jalen Hurts was asked a question about Sirianni, which was, how do you think Sirianni is dealing with the changes? And he just kind of like chuckled and was just like, I don't know. And then they were like, well, can you elaborate on that? He's like, well, he's been really intentional in his message, and and we're just all at work.
Yeah, I see nothing wrong with what he said.
I don't really see too much wrong.
I see
either.
Nothing wrong with it.
I honestly, I sort of feel like nothing wrong with it either. Like, but the whole thing is this. This is now turned into, does Jalen Hurts hate Sirianni?
Yeah, that's clickbait. That's clickbait bullshit. That's what that is.
Well, but there are some articles that said that the Eagles front office wasn't really thrilled with his remarks. Because the one thing he didn't do was, like, they're saying, like, all he should have said and needed to say was, I think Nick is really embracing change, and we're all learning new stuff, and we're all working together, and we're going to try to be a really good offense this year. And he just kind of just didn't give you anything.
Well, they didn't like the fact that he didn't give the politically correct statement, when basically he was probably he was probably just confused by the question.
Right.
Like you're here to ask me questions, and you fire a question at me about how is this other guy dealing with stuff. And I understand what the question was. It's what's your perception of how Sirianni is dealing with Kellen Moore's new offense? When Jalen Hurts, really, it's not up to him to even grade that perception.
Right.
It's up to Jalen Hurts. There's an article here on ESPN right now. Jalen Hurts said 95% of the playbook is new. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what would you rather have Jalen Hurts be doing? Learning a playbook that is 95% different than the last one, so he can play at a high level, or observing how Nick Sirianni is reacting to the new playbook, which is more important.
Right.
So I think it was the last thing on Jalen Hurts' mind.
But it also goes back to the after the season comment, where what happened. And again, I think it's very similar to this, where I think it's like a question that kind of caught him off guard, and he was like, how am I supposed to answer that?
Right.
Like where they asked him after the season, how do you feel about the potential that because of your losing 6 or 7 games, Nick Sirianni could possibly not be back next year? That's
a completely unfair question.
Which is okay. But what you're supposed to do is say, hey, I got Nick Sirianni's back. We've been working together real hard to try to get to a Super Bowl and blah, 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 blah. But what he said last time is, he goes, and I don't think it was that bad, but people are upset with it. He goes, I didn't really even know that was a thing, man.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
It's because he was telling the truth.
Right.
Because he's not considering the fact that because they collapsed, he's not blaming Nick Sirianni. He's blaming himself, and he's blaming the performance of the offense, which he is the general. So, I think in the media, and that's why our shows are so good,
right,
is that it's like the reporters ask dumb questions, but the problem is, and I have to defend them a little bit, is that the general management of these sports teams is trying to regulate the narrative. So they kind of give the players a script. And when the players go off script,
right,
that's actually what makes for good news.
Right.
So the reporters try to ask questions to get the players to go off script,
right,
so they can continue. Look, I just want the fucking story.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Just give me the story.
Right.
Don't
Right.
ask a dumb question like that.
And I think what my sense is that there really is no story.
I don't think there is either.
I don't think there really is, but then again, it's like, look, this is the dead zone.
Right.
And it's like they have to talk about
come up with something. Right. They got to come up with something.
So like I heard Hugh Douglas, former Eagle great, on the other day, and he was like, I see it two ways. He's like, the first way, I think Jalen was just telling the truth. He's like, and I respect that, and he's like, and second of all, I think, he probably, should study leadership 101 and learn how to answer questions from the media.
Yeah. Right. Well, yeah. Yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, it goes back to, what do you want the guy to concentrate on? Look, they got close to winning a Super Bowl a couple years ago. Last year, everybody says they collapsed. Well, from a record standpoint, they did.
Right.
But from the standpoint of, look, they still made the playoffs.
Right.
Okay. They still won the NFC East. Right. So, or did Dallas won it? Right. Well, they still had it. By all accounts, they still had a good year.
When 11 games.
You got to sum the year up at the end of the year. Right. And what it was a great start and a not so great finish.
Right.
Okay. But overall, still a good year. Okay. They put a couple pieces in place. They got Saquon Barkley. I don't think Jalen Hurts is the kind of guy. Now, yes, he got paid, but I think he paid for getting paid last year. And that what happened is the pressure got to him because he wants to win a Super Bowl. There are quarterbacks out there that don't care about winning Super Bowls.
Right.
They care about getting paid. Now, you can't hold it against anybody of Jalen Hurts' caliber that he doesn't want to get paid. Of course he wants to get paid, but I think he wants to win a Super Bowl more than he wants to get paid, because he knows the paycheck's there and it's coming. I think you're going to see a much different quarterback this year. I'm dead serious. I think they are going to light it up. Now, if I'm wrong and they don't, well, we're going to have a lot more fodder to talk about.
Well, I think, the crazy thing is, I think it's going to be one or the other. I think they're either going to light it up or it's going to be a big bust season.
Yeah, I fall on the light it up side of things. The only real question mark, and I don't hear anybody talking about this, and maybe they are in outlets that I don't normally listen to. The real question mark is, how does Saquon Barkley fit in? Okay, because he played for the Giants. And yeah, we can talk about now he plays for the Eagles and he's a professional, and he is. But he played for the Giants, and now he's playing with guys who played against him. How does he fit in? How does he fit into this offense? The saving grace of that. Now, I'm not predicting he's going to do poorly. I think it's all going to hinge around how they use him. Now they have a new offense with Kellen Moore, so it's not about fitting him into an existing offense, because everybody's learning the new offense.
Right.
So I fall more on the side of we are going to be very pleasantly surprised by the way this team looks this year, both on the offense and the defensive side of the ball. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, I just sort of feel like with Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley, and a couple of Pro Bowl offensive linemen, how can you not score a lot of points?
Yeah, I mean, right.
I mean, it's almost impossible.
Right. Now, let's not go down that road and jinx it, but yeah.
Right. But, the defense, to me, the defense is a little more concerning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because last year the secondary was pretty bad except for Slay.
Yeah, and I read their cornerback, the guy they picked up in number one pick. He's been taking a lot of second team snaps right now and playing a lot of the nickel. and the dime, but they're trying to ease him in. So.
Yeah, well, and actually, what's kind of interesting is you remember this guy Isaiah Rodgers who played for the Colts.
Yes, I do.
They got him. See, what happened with him was he got suspended for a year for some sort of gambling issue. Okay.
Yeah, go figure.
But he got reinstated. And so what the Eagles did was they signed him on the cheap after he was released by the Colts.
Yeah.
And just said, hopefully he gets reinstated next year and now we can use him. And they've been saying in the practices, he's been so good. He's been lining up as the other outside corner.
Okay. So you've got.
But still, I think, look, Quinyon Mitchell, the number 1 pick, the number 2 pick, Cooper DeJean, who might end up being like your nickel corner. And then Keely Ringo, a guy they're still really high on. I thought before the draft he was going to start this year. They said he's had a really good, OTAs and everything too. I guess the key thing is, like, of those 3 guys, like 2 of the 3 have to be really good.
Yep.
Have to be really good.
Yep.
If they're not, that's a problem.
Could be a problem.
Right. Could be a problem.
Yeah. Well, a good front 4 and a good linebacking core make up for the sins of an average secondary. Okay. So, there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah. Well, you're hoping that Jalen Carter takes a step this year and becomes like an Aaron Donald type. I mean, now that's a bit high of a mark, but look, everybody felt
he needs to disrupt.
Yeah.
He needs to become a disruptor.
Everybody thought he was the best player in the draft a year ago.
And he had a pretty good rookie season.
He had a pretty good rookie season. So
more on the Eagles coming up soon. Steve does want to know how Big Ken is doing. How is Big Ken? Kenny Pickett?
I have not heard much of anything about Big Ken.
I'd actually be surprised if he was on the team halfway through the season.
Oh no, he'll be on the team.
You think so?
Yeah, he'll be on the team.
I do not want to see Kenny Pickett on the field for the Eagles.
They like to have an experienced backup. And if you've played NFL games, you're experienced.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I get it.
So yeah, he's only going to play if Jalen's hurt.
Yeah.
So hopefully never.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Hopefully
okay.
never.
Follow the Sports Porch podcast on the Sports Porch Philadelphia podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you get your friggin' podcasts. And of course, you can subscribe and click the notifications button on both that and YouTube, Philadelphia Sports Porch. Page 3. It's not a very big page 3. The Sixers right now, who's it going to be? Paul George is seen on NBA Countdown. Of course, we got Dallas tonight trying to come back against Boston. Could this be the big Boston collapse? Because Dallas crushed them.
It could be.
They crushed them.
It could be.
Yeah, I'm hoping
now,
it
the
is.
Grand Schwalbini, he picked Dallas to win this whole thing. And all I can say is, hey, so far, I'm only off by 1 game.
Yeah,
I'm only off by 1 game.
Yeah, we blasted you.
They
last
win in
week
7.
For that. Yeah,
they
still won. You got 50% of the prediction right. And it's the most important 50%.
Right.
What's going on?
Well, I will tell you what. With that, I mean, if Boston loses tonight, they're in trouble.
That's what a lot of people are saying. I think, yes, it puts pressure on them because they do try to coast, and it's almost like they coasted to a 3-0.
Then you got to go into Dallas.
Yeah, and you got to win.
And then if not, you're coming back to Game 7 at home with all the pressure on you.
Yeah, I'd love to see
wouldn't it be great? Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, here's the other interesting thing is that the second the season ends, so like if the Celtics win tonight and the season's over, then at that moment teams can negotiate with players already on their team.
Right.
Okay. Now you can also negotiate with players, already on your team anyway.
Right. Well, of course. Yeah.
But it's more so in like it kicks off free agency in a roundabout way. July 1st then becomes the real free agency where you can talk to everybody. Right. So,
yeah, we all know everybody follows those rules.
Yeah, right.
To the T.
And I was watching Windhorst, on one of the shows today, and he was basically saying he doesn't think that the Clippers are going to offer George the max. So he thinks they're going to try to call his bluff because LA is his home. His home city. Right. They're going to try to call his bluff and see what he does. And so that's why a lot of people think he will go to the Sixers because he wants the money, man. That's look, those guys, I will say this, when we're talking about the Phillies, I know Bryce Harper wants to win a World Series desperately.
Yeah.
A lot of these basketball players, they want to be like the highest paid at their position.
Right.
You know what I mean?
There's a lot of money flowing through the NBA.
Right.
Yeah.
So I could see it being Paul George as the guy.
Does he put the Sixers over the top?
It depends on who you talk to.
Yeah.
I mean, so I heard people talking today, and they were like, he's the perfect fit on the Sixers because he likes to play an open game, and his game is not well suited to play with Harden, but it's suited perfectly to play with Maxey, who's very on the move and run and gun and all this kind of stuff. One thing I will tell you is that I didn't know that Paul George shoots over 40% from three.
Nice.
And what are I forget what they call it, just a catch and shoot three is over 40% as well. So that would be pretty big for them. We'll have to see. Now they made a big thing about it because Paul George was on NBA Countdown before one of these finals games, and Embiid was actually not supposed to be on NBA Countdown, but he was in the building just watching the game. And, some guys were like, hey, can we get you on NBA Countdown? And he got on, and he was sitting next to Paul George. And they were talking about one thing I will say is pretty cool about Embiid is Embiid does actually care. He actually said, look, Boston has great fans. It's a great city, but I'll just be honest. He's like, I just hate Boston.
Yeah, I know. I heard.
But then he was just like, and they were like, what are you going to do next year? He's like, well, we're going to add some pieces. And then he went like that to Paul George.
Yeah.
So, and everybody was kind of like, oh, do we know something?
Yeah. Well, we have the NBA finals here.
Yep.
The game tonight, game 6, right? Game 5. Is tonight at 8:00 on ABC. Here's a good question for you, and this is more of a kind of a other side of the state question.
Yep.
Paul Skeens is pitching tonight for the Pirates, and he's a phenom.
Yes.
People are actually flying into town to buy tickets.
Yeah.
What would you rather watch, Paul Skeens pitch or Game 5 of the NBA Finals?
Well, it's not really a fair question. Because
they're on at the same time. You have one TV and a gun to your head.
But the NBA, it's like, hey, if you put on the last 5 minutes, you've seen it all.
There you go.
So you know what? Watch Paul Skeens pitch for 6 innings, and then go watch the end of the basketball.
You could probably watch him. Yeah,
right.
There you go.
Right. But NBA playoffs, sure, you got to go with that.
Yeah, we're gonna ask that on the next show. Okay, Sports Porch Philadelphia, Facebook, YouTube, X, and of course, we drop the podcast right after the show. Anywhere you listen to your podcast, hit the subscribe button, the notifications button, leave us a review. We would love that. Last topic up for discussion. We're getting closer and closer to the 2024 Philadelphia Cheesesteak Challenge on Facebook. I'm starting to get really excited about this. I mean, I was getting really excited 3 months ago. But.
Well, it's exciting because you get hungry.
Yeah, I am hungry.
And, we have plans that you weren't able to make it last year. I went with my wife to Curly's, the winner.
Yeah.
But, this year we plan to do the same thing. You and I take a trip out to Philadelphia, go to the winner, maybe even sample a few others while we're out there.
We will this year. This year, I know we will.
Yeah. So it's going to be fun. And, people get all into it, 10,000 plus voters.
Yeah.
I'm going to, be adding a few new places to the list this year.
Yeah.
So it's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. We're still trying to work on potentially getting some owners of cheesesteak joints in the Philly area. So if anybody here is listening and you want to get on our show and you want to talk some cheesesteaks, reach out to us.
On Philadelphia Beautiful's Facebook page, send a message through Messenger.
Send a message.
You did have one person commit to it, right?
We have one that's committed, but we want at least 2.
Who committed?
Even 3.
Let's get these people to understand that one of their competitors has committed to being. It's gonna be the great cheesesteak debate. It's going to be less of a debate, but more of a discussion between fantastic cheesesteak makers,
right,
and how they go about making their cheesesteaks
right,
and what makes a cheesesteak great. So who's already committed?
Curly has committed.
The winner from last year, Curly's Comfort Food.
Well, he recognizes how much excitement
how much
brought,
and how much business it brings in.
Business it brought in.
We have sent people from across the state, to partake of Curly's cheesesteaks in Levittown.
We have.
Yeah. So if you're out there and you were on this list last year and you're ignoring Mark's phone calls and Mark's messages, if you want to get in on the great cheesesteak debate and get some business to your place, you need to be in this debate, because literally thousands, and we're not blowing smoke up your ass, thousands and thousands of Philadelphia faithful vote in these contests. And not only do they vote, the winner isn't the only winner. Everybody who is in the contest is a big winner.
Right.
It creates business for them,
right,
local business. So get off your ass, answer the phone, respond to the message, come on the show, and let's talk about some cheesesteaks.
Let's do it.
How about that one?
Yep, I like it.
How about that one?
All right, I think that's it.
I think that's it exactly right now. And as always, I got a little late start on the music.
That's all right. That's all right. You're always self-degrading.
That's right. That's because that's who I am.
Nobody would have known.
I am degrading of self.
Nobody would have known. The music came on.
Yeah, it did. You're right.
You didn't have to say I suck.
Yeah, I didn't say I suck.
Well, I kind of did.
Well, no, I think you're saying I suck.
You said I suck.
Okay. Thanks for watching the Sports Porch Philadelphia on Facebook, YouTube, X. And if you listen to the podcast, thanks so much for being here. Remember, if you watch us on YouTube at Philadelphia Sports Porch, I always want to say at Philadelphia Sports Porch on YouTube, click the subscribe and the notifications button. If you listen to the podcast on Spotify, Apple, iHeart, or anywhere you get your friggin' podcasts, subscribe and leave us a review. We would love that. The Dead Zone is fast coming to a close.
It's coming to a close.
And we can't wait. We're out of here.
Peace.